Pack your things and get out of my son's house by Friday, or I'll have the sheriff remove you," my father-in-law Richard declared, standing in my doorway at 7 a.m. with what he thought was an eviction notice. I glanced at the paper in his hand, then at the actual deed to the house tucked in my desk drawer, and wondered if he'd forgotten that his precious son hadn't contributed a penny to this property. How would Richard's face change when he discovered who really owned every brick, every tile, every blade of grass he was so eager to claim? The morning had started like any other Tuesday, coffee brewing, news playing softly on the kitchen TV, my work laptop already open on the counter. Then Richard's pounding had shattered the peace, using the spare key I foolishly let him keep for emergencies. Apparently, his definition of emergency was very different from mine. "Good morning to you too, Richard," I said, tightening my robe. "Would you like some coffee before you attempt to illegally evict me from my own home?" His face flushed red, the same shade it turned during his infamous Thanksgiving rants about this generation's lack of respect. Behind him, I could see my neighbor Mrs. Patterson pretending to water her already drowning petunias, eager for the drama. "You're home," Richard scoffed, waving the paper like a weapon. "This is the Garrison family home, bought and paid for by Garrison money. And since my son has finally come to his senses about the sham of a marriage, it's time for you to go." Interesting. I leaned against the doorframe, studying the man who'd made my life miserable for 7 years. "And where exactly is your son during this grand eviction?" "Thailand," Richard said proudly, finding himself. "He'll be back when he's ready to reclaim his life." Thailand. Of course. Last I'd heard from mutual friends, Connor was finding himself at the bottom of many bottles and in the beds of many tourists. But in Richard's mind, his son was on some noble journey of self-discovery that would eventually lead him back to reclaim his rightful place without the inconvenient wife who'd never been good enough for the Garrison name. "Did Connor send you to do this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He doesn't know yet. It's a surprise for when he returns. I'm handling the family business as always." Family business, that's what Richard called his constant interference. The man who tried to veto our wedding venue for being too common, who'd insisted on adding his name to what he assumed were our joint accounts, who'd shown up to couples therapy to explain why I was wrong for his son. "Well, Richard, I appreciate your initiative, but there's a small problem with your plan." I stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. "Come in. Let's discuss this like adults." He hesitated, clearly not expecting civility. "No tricks, Jade. I have my lawyer on speed dial." "No tricks. Just facts. Please come in. Mrs. Patterson's petunias can only take so much water." He entered warily, his eyes scanning the foyer as if seeing it for the first time. The hardwood floors I personally restored, the chandelier I'd found at an estate sale and refurbished, the gallery wall of photos that, I noticed now, contained not a single picture of Connor from the last 2 years. "Can I see this eviction notice?" I asked, settling into my favorite armchair. He handed it over reluctantly. I read through it, biting back a laugh. He clearly printed this off some legal website, filling in the blanks with fiction. According to this document, Connor Garrison was the sole owner of the property, and I was a month-to-month tenant who'd violated some vague, moral conduct clause. "Richard, did you have a lawyer prepare this?" "I don't need a lawyer to remove a squatter from my son's house." "A squatter. After 7 years of marriage." "A failed marriage," he corrected. "Connor told me about your difficulties." "Our difficulties." Like Connor's gambling addiction that drained our savings. His 3 affairs that he'd blamed on my lack of spontaneity. His inability to hold a job for more than 6 months because every boss was too stupid to recognize his genius. Yes, we had difficulties, I agreed. Which is why we separated 8 months ago. Legally, with lawyers. Did Connor not mention that? Richard shifted uncomfortably. Separation isn't divorce. This is still his house. Is it though? I stood walking to my home office. "Follow me, Richard. I want to show you something." He followed reluctantly, probably expecting me to beg or cry, his version of how women should respond to authority. Instead, I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out a folder labeled Haus Important. "Let's start with the purchase agreement," I said, laying out the document. "Notice the date, 2 years before Connor and I met. Notice the buyer's name, Jade Winters, not Garrison. That's because I kept my maiden name, remember? You threw quite the tantrum at the rehearsal dinner about that. Richard's face was beginning to pale. That's not, Connor said. Here's the deed, I continued, laying out another document. Sole owner, Jade Winters. No Connor Garrison anywhere on this paperwork. And here, I pulled out bank statements. 5 years of mortgage payments, all from my personal account. The account Connor never had access to because, fun fact, I never actually added him to any of my financial assets. But he lived here. Marital property. Here's our prenuptial agreement. I placed it in front of him with satisfaction. The one you insisted on, remember, to protect Connor's future inheritance from his gold-digger wife. Section 3, paragraph B. All assets owned prior to marriage remain separate property. Your idea, your lawyer, your insistence. Ironic, isn't it? Richard sank into my desk chair without asking, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. Connor said the house was his. He's been telling everyone that he's a successful real estate developer, that he bought this place as an investment. Yes, I'm aware of his stories. Did he also tell you about the business he claimed to run from this address? The one that was actually me working from home as a financial consultant. You're lying. I pulled out my laptop, logging into the county assessor's website. Here's the public record. Anyone can look this up. Richard. Owner, Jade Winters. Purchase date, March 15th, 2016. No liens, no co-owners, no Connor. His hand shook as he reached for his phone. I need to call my lawyer. Good idea. While you do that, let me show you something else. I opened another folder. Divorce papers. Filed 6 weeks ago. Connor was served at his apartment. Yes, he has an apartment now. He signed them. We're just waiting for the final decree. Divorced? He didn't tell me. Because he's been too busy finding himself to talk to his father, or because he knew you'd ask about the house. I watched him dial, noting the tremor in his fingers. Ask your lawyer about trespassing laws while you're at it. And harassment, and attempted illegal eviction. Richard stood abruptly, phone to his ear, and walked to the window. I could hear him speaking in urgent whispers, lots of but he said, and that can't be right, and check again. While he argued with reality via his lawyer, I made myself coffee and sent a quick text to my own attorney. FIL showed up with fake eviction notice. Currently having meltdown in my office. May need restraining order. Her response was immediate. On it. Save all documentation. Recording. I glanced at the small security camera in the corner of my office, its red light steady. Always. Richard ended his call and turned to face me, looking 10 years older than when he'd arrived. My lawyer says. He says Connor lied. Connor lied about a lot of things, Richard. This is just the one that affects you. But why would he? I gave him money for the down payment, $50,000. My coffee mug paused halfway to my lips. When? 6 years ago. He said you two were buying a house together. He showed me pictures of this place. 6 years ago, a year after we married, when Connor had supposedly started his import/export business that mysteriously never imported or exported anything. Richard, I bought this house 8 years ago. Connor gave you pictures of my house and told you he was buying it. The old man slumped against the window. He said you were putting in half. Said it was a joint investment. I gave him the money for his half. And you never thought to verify, never asked to see paperwork. He's my son, Richard said quietly. I trusted him. For the first time since I'd met Richard Garrison, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Not much. The man had made my life hell for years, but enough to soften my voice. He's an addict, Richard. Gambling, primarily, but also the adrenaline of the con. He's been lying to everyone for years. You're the liar, he said, but without conviction. You turned him against me, against his family. His family enabled him. You've been cleaning up his messes since he was a child. The DUI you made disappear when he was 17. The plagiarism scandal at university that you paid to go away. The business partner he defrauded that you quietly settled with. Did you think it would stop? Those were mistakes. Young men make mistakes. Middle-aged men who've never faced consequences make disasters. I set down my coffee. Where do you think your $50,000 really went, Richard? His face crumpled. He had debts. Gambling debts. Said they'd hurt him if he didn't pay. And the $30,000 before that? For the investment opportunity? How did you? And the 20,000 for the medical emergency that wasn't. The 15,000 for the legal trouble that didn't exist. I pulled out one more folder. I've been documenting everything, Richard. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation. Not because I'm vindictive, but because I needed evidence for the divorce. And maybe deep down, because I knew this day would come. He sank back into the chair, the fight completely gone. Show me. For the next hour, I laid out the evidence of his son's systematic deception. The forged documents he used to get loans. The credit cards he'd opened in my name that I discovered and closed. The joint ventures that were nothing but Connor taking money from investors and gambling it away. The affairs funded by his father's investments in non-existent businesses. This is why I kept everything separate, I explained. Why I insisted on the prenup, not because I was planning to leave, but because I could see what he was. Maybe before you could. Or maybe I just didn't want to see, Richard admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. His mother always said I was too soft on him. Connor's mother had died when he was 12. Richard had tried to fill that void with money and blind faith. He needs help, Richard. Real help. Not another bailout or another excuse. Where is he really? Not Thailand. I pulled up Connor's Instagram on my phone. The latest post showed him at a casino in Macau, champagne in hand, surrounded by people who didn't know him well enough to see the desperation behind his smile. Gambling away someone else's money, I assume, Richard said flatly. Probably. The only reason he signed the divorce papers so easily was because I agreed not to pursue the identity theft charges if he stayed away. Identity theft. Did you wonder why I was so prepared for your visit today? This isn't the first time someone's tried to take my house. Connor attempted to forge my signature on a home equity loan 6 months ago. That's what finally made me file for divorce. Richard's phone rang. He looked at the screen and grimaced. Connor, are you going to answer? He hesitated, then declined the call. What would be the point? He's just calling for money. We sat in silence for a moment. The man who burst into my home with such self-righteous authority now looked deflated, sitting in my office surrounded by evidence of his son's betrayal. I owe you an apology, he said finally. Several, actually. Yes. Several. He looked around the office, really seeing it for the first time. You've done well for yourself, without any help from us. Despite active hindrance from you, you mean. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Fair point. I never gave you a chance, did I? You decided I wasn't good enough before you met me. Wrong family, wrong background, wrong career. The prenup was supposed to protect Connor from me, but it ended up protecting me from him. Ironic. Karmic, I'd say. Richard stood slowly, looking every day of his 70 years. I'll need to change the locks at my house. Cancel his credit cards. Contact my lawyer about everything. Get him into rehab first, I suggested. Real rehab, not the spa he went to last time. He's sick, Richard. This isn't just bad behavior anymore. If I can find him. He'll come to you when the money runs out. He always does. Richard picked up his fake eviction notice, crumpling it in his hands. I'm sorry about this. About all of it. 7 years of it. I survived. You did more than that. He gestured at the house around us. You thrived, in spite of us. Because of me, I corrected. My success was never about you or Connor. It was about building a life I could be proud of. He walked to the door, then paused. The divorce, is it final? 2 more weeks. Good. You deserve better than my son. The words seemed to physically pain him. I should have seen that years ago. After you left, I locked the door and leaned against it, finally allowing myself to feel the exhaustion of the morning's drama. My phone buzzed with texts from my lawyer, my friends, my sister. Word traveled fast in our suburban neighborhood. But it was the email notification that made me smile. An offer on the house from the couple who'd viewed it last week. Above asking price. I walked through the rooms I'd lovingly restored, remembering all the dreams I'd had when I bought this place. Some had come true. Others had shattered. But the foundation, my foundation, had held strong. Time for a new beginning. A new house without the ghosts of the Garrison family haunting every corner. Maybe something with a better security system and definitely without spare keys for anyone. I called my realtor. Accept the offer and start looking for something new. Something that's entirely mine. What about your husband? Ex-husband in 2 weeks, and he never lived here anyway, no matter what his father thought. That evening, as I packed the first box, I found our wedding photo tucked behind some books. Connor's smile was charming, confident, full of promise. Richard stood beside him, proud and protective. I'd been so young, so hopeful, so willing to believe that love could overcome fundamental character flaws. I tossed the photo in the trash, then thought better of it. Instead, I tucked it into the box labeled Lessons Learned. Someday, when the anger faded, I might want to remember. Not the pain, but the strength I'd found in surviving it. My phone rang. Richard. Connor called again, he said without preamble. He's in trouble. Wants to come home. And I told him the house was gone. That you owned it all along. That I knew everything. How did he react? He hung up. Richard paused. I think that's the first time I've ever told him no. It gets easier, I said. The first no is the hardest. Does it get easier? I looked around my house, at the life I built and protected, and was now ready to leave behind for something even better. Yes, I said. It really does. 2 weeks later, the divorce was final. A month after that, I closed on the sale of the house. Richard sent a certified check for $50,000 with a note. This was never Connor's to take. Use it for your new beginning. I donated it to a nonprofit that helped gambling addicts. The last I heard, Connor was in rehab, real rehab this time. Richard was in therapy, learning to set boundaries with his son. And I was in my new condo, with a view of the city and not a single garrison in sight. The doorman knew not to let anyone up without calling first. The deed was in my name only, and the locks? Those were mine too. Every single one.